Scarface, 1983, directed by Brian De Palma, based on a screenplay by Oliver Stone, loosely derived from a film by Howard Hawks and Howard Hughes that starred Paul Muni and George Raft. Of course, the 1983 version is the one we're going to be talking about today, and that starred Al Pacino and Stephen Bauer in those same roles. I love De Palma's Scarface, and I love it for basically a million different reasons. Every single second of it reminds me why I fell in love with movies in the first place. In fact, every single one of you guys, okay, this is a stone cold masterpiece. It's a masterwork. It's a master class film. Essential, beautiful, wonderful, perfect, nearly flawless, and all of you people who don't like it out there, there's quite a few of you, you are officially dead to me for the remainder of this review. Scarface is incredible, it is wonderful, and I believe it is peak Brian De Palma. I believe 1 year later, in '84, he'd make Body Double, and it's truly a toss-up between Body Double and Scarface for my personal favorite De Palma film. There's a lot of Phantom of the Paradise purists out there, and I love that movie too, but nothing truly compares to kind of early to mid-'80s opulent, operatic De Palma. That's truly, to me, where he was at the peak of his form, when he was truly the maestro of trash erotica. And he brings the language. I think the reason why Scarface is so brilliant is because it's a film of constant forward momentum when it comes to structure, when it comes to camera work. The camera is constantly on the move. It's an extremely, incredibly fluid, lyrical, and musical experience that borders on excessive, but remains slightly subdued. And this is where I think it gets so brilliant, because De Palma obviously wasn't too invested in the gangster genre. Deconstructions of Alfred Hitchcock thrillers is really where his heart was. And as a deconstructionist, him doing a remake makes complete sense, and he and Oliver Stone truly inversed so much of the classicist tropes that come with gangster films to make this specific one. But De Palma was a master of the thriller, but specifically a master of the opulent operatic thriller. And so he brings that language and aligns it with the gangster genre. He injects the gangster genre with Hitchcockian elements and with truly De Palma-esque figures. The camera work is so extraordinary. The camera is always doing something fascinating, and it's fascinatingly out of its element, too, which adds such a great paranoia. Al Pacino had a wonderful performance, and it truly is the inverse of his famous portrayal of gangsters in the past. It's an inverse of Michael Corleone. It's an inverse of that icy resolve, whereas in the Godfather films, Al Pacino, I think, did so remarkably well because he was so inhuman, he was so emotionless in his behavior. As Tony Montana, he cannot hide anything. He leaps through emotional and theatrical acrobatics and contrivances as well, but they are beautifully rendered, because Tony Montana can't tell a lie. Even when he tells the truth, he can't tell a lie. You know, he's always telling the truth, even when he lies. It's completely wonderful. He wears everything on his face, and he doesn't keep anything hidden from you. All of his emotions are out for you to grab and to intuit. Not even to intuit, it's just there, it's just loud in your face, because the excessive nature comes from Oliver Stone, and Brian De Palma is also known for excess, but he is known for his brilliant compositional methods. And Scarface is composed brilliantly. And what I was getting at with that whole idea of paranoia, because Tony Montana is also an incredibly paranoid figure and a deluded figure. And the fact that De Palma is really telling this rise and fall gangster story through the language of Hitchcockian thrillers, it brings a whole new dimension to it, because it just radiates with paranoia. It radiates with inevitable catastrophe. It radiates with hyper-violent dread. and it's a completely extraordinary that way. I think Brian De Palma is a master. He was one of my first most favorite filmmakers, and Scarface was certainly a film that helped me become the cinephile that I am today. I still remember that VHS. The VHS is plural, pluralities here, because there were two of them. After the scene with Tony in the hot tub or the jacuzzi, you'd have to switch it out to watch, like, and then it goes into them laundering money. I still remember that very physical, very tactile ritual of changing out the cassette tapes to complete the film. And that also got me thinking about the ritualistic nature of capitalism within gangster stories. Any gangster film that has any authenticity or integrity, much like a Western, has to be against capitalism in a way. And Scarface certainly is, in a very ironic and very deliberate way. Like, a Western has to be against capitalism because it has to be, in essence, at its core, against the expansion of industry. The federal government killed the West. A monoculture of sameness killed the Old West outlaw, killed that archetype that we share and that we understand in our heads. The gangster genre has to show you how capitalism cannibalizes itself, or else it's just not a worthwhile gangster film, or else it doesn't actually have an ethos or some sort of informative quality when it comes down to literal content. And Scarface is absolutely that. Tony Montana, it's an immigrant's tale, and he exemplifies every quality that the excessive, opulent 80s rewarded, right? Capitalism rewards very specific types of psychopathic behaviors and sociopathic behaviors, and Tony Montana really just embodied every single one, every one of these narcissistic and ultra-violent qualities and completely selfish qualities as well. Tony Montana was the ultimate American dream, and Michelle Pfeiffer, who took my breath away every time she came on screen, one of the most beautiful women ever photographed, she was kind of like a trophy, a literal trophy, absolutely, of what it truly meant to be successful and to be an American for Tony Montana. And once he possessed her, once he obtained her like a possession, he realized it was empty, that it was barren, that it couldn't provide any children, that it was falling apart, that its pipes were completely dead. It was just high on coke, high on everything, disillusioned. That the American dream itself, the very symbol of it, blonde hair, blue eyes, Michelle Pfeiffer, beautiful and perfect, is completely disillusioned. And self-hating as well, which is what Tony certainly becomes. And I do like the incestual qualities here that carried over from the Howard Hawks original film, which I also love and feel it's incredibly undervalued. The incestual qualities, I think those are the qualities I really think got De Palma going. Because those are slightly Freudian in a way, and De Palma expresses the kind of monomania that Tony has when it comes to erotic feelings of carnal feelings for his sister Gina. He expresses those in the best De Palma ways. That's when it becomes trash erotica of dread, a super thriller, a super eerie, like I said, hyper-violent, dreadful moments all around when we're talking about the incestual nature. And of course that adds kind of like a classicist, like a Greek tragedy vibe to the entire story, and I like that carried over. But it's more or less a deconstruction of the original gangster film, and I think by proxy of that, it's a deconstruction of the popular gangster film up until that point. Because De Palma is making several statements that are against capitalism, but I believe that he is bitter, and I believe that he is just as jaded enough to believe that they are irreversible. So you're watching this film, and I don't believe he's saying, don't be like Tony. I believe he's saying it's impossible not to be like Tony in this world that we are living in. And it's going to get, I believe Oliver Stone probably feels the same way as well. He's a very nihilistic filmmaker, much more nihilistic than De Palma, actually. So his screenplay probably had a lot of these elements involved in it. A lot of these components were truly there. And Brian De Palma is using the most incredible camera work. It's really just so incredible. Body Double, he was incredibly good with his camera as well, but this 2-year time span, Scarface and Body Double, really, it's the best display of De Palma's skill as a visual stylist, as he would like to be called, but I would call him as a filmmaking master. He's telling this story that is anti-capitalist, but is also self-aware enough to understand that when you put a figure on a screen, he's going to appear heroic, he's going to appear iconic no matter what, and that there is a certain iconic status that goes with certain behaviors associated with success within capitalism, specifically within the early to mid-80s, and I believe is only, it's kind of like a premonition, right? It's only gotten worse and worse and worse as time has gone on, and maybe that's why this film has been adopted by so many materialistic communities who never truly understood that really it was a film about the immorality of materialism, of narcissism, of all the qualities that go with it. I believe that De Palma was just slightly nihilistic enough, just pessimistic enough to go, this isn't going to change. This isn't going to change, it's just going to get worse. We're going to get more and more Tony Montanas because we're going to get more and more children, more and more immigrants, more and more new people trying to live out their own version of the American dream, and they could only look to other examples of it. And if every example we have of success of the American dream are these incredibly narcissistic success stories, then that's what they're going to emulate. And they're only going to contort it and make it a bit more unforgivable. I thought this film was incredible. I thought basically every single thing about it shocked and floored me. This is De Palma making a gangster film, and he wasn't too interested in making gangster films, but every time he did, he reinvented something about that wheel. Something about that incredible American crime wheel. When he would come with Scarface, Carlito's Way, and The Untouchables, he would tell these gangster films through the lens of the filmic thriller language. He would use the grammar of Hitchcock, or truly the grammar of De Palma, in order to tell these gangster films, and it feels so alien sometimes, and it feels constantly paranoid. The stakes are that much higher because he's a master of suspense, and a lot of gangster films don't necessarily have that quality. Then again, like someone like Francis Ford Coppola was far more interested in subtlety and nuance and grace, which are things that aren't in De Palma's visual vocabulary, and Martin Scorsese, of course, is interested in spiritual tests and divine qualities, in the impermanence of time itself and the inevitability of doom. Whereas De Palma is far more interested in orchestration, the complete visual orchestration. I think he couldn't care less about the story that is being shown on screen. He's more interested in how it's expressed visually. And that really shows in films like Scarface and Body Double and even The Untouchables, which I just mentioned. I think it's flat out phenomenal. A lot of people like to rag on this film, but I think they like to rag on it because they can't get on with the nihilistic attitude of the film. Because yes, the film is showing you the downfalls of narcissism, materialism, and just being completely selfish. It is displaying the downfalls of that, while at the same time it is actively participating in creating a new modernist legend that maybe you shouldn't look up to, but I believe that is completely deliberate on De Palma's part, on Oliver Stone's part, and on Pacino's part, most certainly. Because it's kind of, to me, nearly tongue-in-cheek. It's very self-aware in that this is what you want, this is what you will end up as. This kind of fallen, very loud, abrasive, brash, and ultimately childish and perverted gangster. That's what the American dream has led us to. That's what the immigrant's tale has led us to. That's what the great American dream means to people just trying to make a success out of themselves. That's what success means. To me, that's incredibly fascinating, incredibly worth exploring. You know, growing up in this world, you try to make a success out of yourself, and you look at all of the prime examples of it, and all the prime examples are kind of astonishingly cruel and terrible. There are skeletons in the closet of every successful billionaire in our time period. And it's just getting worse and worse. Tony Montana, the greatest quality about him is at least he wasn't a liar. He told the truth even when he was lying. And that he knew that the world needed a bad guy. Well, say goodnight to the bad guy, right? Only to say hello to another one the next day. That capitalism cannibalizes itself, and I think that Tony Montana is the best example of capitalism cannibalizing itself on film. At the very end, you are watching a carcass waddle around with a machine gun, talking about his little friend getting riddled with bullets and shot in the back. The world is yours. De Palma's language, this was peak De Palma, top of his game, and this film is flawless. Absolutely flawless. Every single flaw that you think the film has is actually deliberately put in there and composed to be that loud, that excessive, that over the top, because that is the way the American ethos had become at that point, and I believe it's just gotten, oh my god, more terrible. This is a wonderful film. I love Brian De Palma to death. And Scarface is wonderful. Yes, one of the things that made me a cinephile in the first place. I want to thank you for watching this video. My name is Zachary Conan. In the comments, what do you think about Scarface 1983? What do you think about this film? I could rave about this film for hours. And you know what? It's my channel and you know how I operate. I just might. So in the comments, let's start a conversation, a bit of a debate. Is Scarface a masterpiece? Is it overrated? Or is it just a product of its time? I feel it transcends all of those categories, and it is a perfect film no matter how you cut it, no matter which way you split it. It's brilliant. To Scarface, everybody. Light 'em if you got 'em. Have a wonderful day.